Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Pressing Forward podcast. Thanks for tuning in again. Today I've got the pleasure of my guest is Ben Fortier. He is a United States Marine, also doing some poetry and jamming on the good old guitar. Ben, how you doing today, brother?
Good man. Thanks for having me onto your show. It's been really cool seeing the guests that you have on here. Definitely some notable names. You got fucking Blake, Justin Hagan, Mason, the usual suspects. So I was like, let me fucking hit this guy up and get on his channel and fucking, we can just kind of shoot the shit. So that way, we can tell each other's story and everything because I'm really interested in like not only what, I've told my story a handful of times and just kind of curious as to what, you expect from, the community. And because, I see myself as just a representative of the fucking, veteran writing community. And I haven't carried that flag for a long time, dude. Like, I put out a poetry book in 2009 and like to nobody's like audience. I just fucking did it. It was one of those things where I had a bunch of poems written from like teenage years to at that time I was about 19, 20, just came back from Fallujah and had a bunch of shit that I wanted to get on paper and just went the self-publishing route. Amazon had what was then called Create Space has evolved into Kindle Direct Publishing, which is now is a platform for people to self-publish all kinds of media and shit like that.
All right, so
Um,
this was in 2009. Can you still find that poetry book out there? I'll have to check that out. What's the name of that?
yeah, so the first one I
Oh
don't
shit, there's
usually.
multiple. All right.
Yeah, so I got
Well, hold on, let's do
a
this.
couple books.
Let's dive
Sure.
into how you got there, and then we'll go over,
Okay.
kind of the way that those books had developed and what gave you the ideas to get into those. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
starting off, I always like to, figure out where you're from, what life was kind of like growing up as a kid. Dive into that.
Cool. Yeah, no problem. I grew up in northern Rhode Island. It was a pretty rural part of the state. It was not bad as far as like the education system. Had a lot of friends growing up. Household for the first, 8 or so years was kind of violent. I had an older brother who was like, towing on like being a criminal and shit like that. So it was a bit hectic for those like first, several years where he was a teenager and fucking dealing with the wrong crowd and stuff. But
So
I ended
did that
up.
like roll in when you say violent in the sense of he was violent with you, or like your parents were getting into it with him and shit? How did that work out?
Yeah, it was he we would fight a bit and toss around a bit, and there were instances where my parents were getting handsy with him and shit. So it was a tough kind of first 8-10 years. But I at the time I didn't really think much of it. I just kind of fucking thrived in the best way that I could. School was a nice outlet. I had fucking plenty of friends, and I really enjoyed learning in the education system. So the military had always been this sort of it was rolled into my values as like somebody who grew up in a more conservative household, and it spoke to what I believe are the inherent values of the morally good areas of the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all these sacred fucking documents that all Marines to some degree have knowledge of, but at one point or another, we consciously, did the oath thing and all that shit. So I would encourage everyone to actually read those fucking documents and see what they
Like
mean.
which ones are you talking about? Like the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, like
Yeah,
what
yeah, and any of those, and I mean, dude, there's such like fucking I'm holding up my phone, but like here we have the black mirrors that we can just gaze into the fucking infinite depths of knowledge, and there's nowhere that, we can't say that that shit isn't accessible. And so, I had this grandiose vision of what it was to be somebody who was discovering their path as a citizen, their path as a man, as fucking somebody who wants to be an adult in, the big world and stuff. Because even as a kid, I was, I've recently discovered that I'm a highly sensitive person, and I don't feel too bad saying that shit because Tyler Hasey, has lauded that shit, and I'm like, dude, fucking, I will fall in lockstep with that shit because there's the criteria for that, and I actually just started reading the book, The Highly Sensitive Person, which is based upon that psychology kind of category. And I was like, dude, if I could fucking be a U.S. Marine in the infantry, and like harness those fucking values that I believed in as an American, but also like kind of intertwine that warrior culture. I was like, dude, I could dominate my dreams,
So you're thinking
and
this before you go into the service? This is like what you're thinking of, this all-encompassing thing of dominating your dreams with, whatever your grander vision was for time in service and finding your path to becoming a responsible man. Is that where you're going with that? Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yep,
So I mean, did 9/11 compel you to do this? Were there books that you read or things that you saw? Like, what was it that kind of kickstarted that yearning to find something like the military?
for sure, man. There was all kinds of. I definitely embodied, or fucking, that's not the right word. I definitely dove into the pop culture of the military and stuff. I don't know if you can. I got a couple movie posters behind me, but one of them's, Predator, fucking Aliens, So, I was watching these movies being like, why can't, like, what makes it possible for them to like get to that elite level and shit like that. So I was influenced by the more elite tier shit. Obviously, I think that kind of captures a lot of young kids as they're fucking, learning about this shit. But at the end of the day, I was like, dude, I I'm not like a hardcore motherfucker, like physically and shit. I'm pretty average, mentally and intellectually. I'm probably, above average, but that doesn't mean shit really in the world of fucking snake eaters. Unbeknownst to me, at the time, that's kind of was my silly, narrow mindset, right? But to me, it was the appeal of, like I said, finding that inner warrior and seeing how it kind of meshes with what I knew myself to be as an artist, as somebody who really enjoyed literature, as somebody who, would rather just be fucking pecking away at computers and shit like that. And really just to get out of my fucking comfort zone, to leave my house. That was really a big thing for me. It was just to like get away from my parents and like maybe see the bigger picture for a little bit. Because I come from a real small town where it was like 400 kids graduated my high school class. 9/11 did have a big impact on me, and I'm sure tons of your almost all of your viewers and listeners and shit, as in your guests and yourself. We can all remember that story, like where we were and shit. That like it was the direction, it was a directional shift in terms of what I thought was going to be a fucking, like a small journey into the Marine Corps that, maybe we'll get like on a float and like something like fucking Beirut will happen, or, any one of those, floats to Africa that saw action, Mogadishu,
So just like
Somalia, stuff like
small,
that.
small conflicts, like stuff that wasn't really a 20-year war, essentially. You'd be thinking like, you're on a 3-month excursion in Panama or, I don't know, some little conflict that occurred. But and you're like, so this is stuff that you're thinking about before you're in, or like now that been in, you're thinking about this. That's
Yeah, no, let me backtrack a little bit. So, circa, let's start with 2001. So, I grow up, I'm thinking about the military. I have a bunch of friends around me that are thinking about the military. I don't come from a military family per se. Like, I have a grandfather who was a Navy Seabee. I heard some stories from him. I had a grandfather on my dad's side who I didn't really know. He was a Marine, but I didn't really, ever
didn't have like a
experience.
hardcore military lineage, like coming from,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
Uh,
So it was kind of like debatable. I was really intrigued by, at the time, at peacetime prior to 9/11, I was really intrigued by the reserve component. A lot of local units around here up in the Northeast. Like I said, I grew up in Rhode Island. I basically stayed around like the Northeast area my whole life. Um, So it was like pretty intriguing to me. I did Civil Air Patrol when I was a teenager, which are you familiar with that?
mm-mm.
No, it's like the Air Force Auxiliary, but for like kids and adults. It's kind of like a Boy Scout kind of organization, but they
Okay.
also assist in search and rescue. They do a lot of avionics and aerospace education. But their big, to do was they dropped bombs a couple times on U-boats in like World War, off the coast of fucking the US in World War II or something.
Okay.
So it was it was my way of kind of learning drill, fucking how to salute, how to fucking left face, right face,
Right, like the
about
same
face,
same
some of
kind of
that
things that
stuff.
the delayed entry program is going to teach you, some basic drill stuff. So what year is it that you ultimately end up joining the Marine Corps?
It was 2005 that the recruiter came by and signed the papers. And up until that point, like I said, I've been kind of toying with the idea of like Army National Guard, Air Force, Air National Guard, and then I started learning, because to me at that time, like Rangers, Ranger Battalion was really appealing. Fucking Green Berets, Delta Force, that kind of thing. So I was curious to take that path, and I think there are a couple SF units out of Rhode Island as well. But it didn't go that way just because I was like, all right, I kind of want to like dip my toes in the water a little bit and just like see what the experience is like. So
You
circa,
you knew you wanted to be a reservist though, like you're like like you for sure wanted to be a reservist, like have that ability to have your civilian life, your home life, as well as do the service to your country.
yeah, yep, that was super appealing to me because the the other appealing thing to me was chasing more education and getting a degree and fucking, just getting after that path, I guess.
Right.
And and I knew the benefits, but it wasn't like my number one thing, obviously. It was just a nice way to do it. And obviously, given the phase that we've gone through with post 9/11, so much has happened legislatively that um, we a lot of us can be, well taken care of with a lot of benefits that people aren't aware of. So hopefully, this can be a platform where you can help spread a little bit of messages about that because
Oh,
there's
definitely. Yeah.
so many
Definitely.
uh
Definitely.
so many avenues to go with that and all that. But
So
uh
recruiter signs your papers in 2005. When do you ship off to boot camp?
yeah, not soon after. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. No, it was 2005 that I went to boot camp 2004 that I signed the papers because I was in the DEP for about a year. And those were, that, it gives how were you in the delayed entry program?
Yeah, I think I did it for like 3 months or 4 months or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was like whatever. I did get to see my where I would end up drilling with 1st Battalion, 25th Marines. So yeah, I met with the recruiter. It wasn't long into high school that recruiters were showing up, and at this point, I was like, Marines, fucking 2004-ish. I signed the paperwork. I was like just about 17. My parents had to fucking legally sign me away and shit.
Right.
And did about a year in the depth. In like Iraq was happening, dude. Like, my friends and I, we were paying attention to this shit, and we were following names like Rafael Peralta and Kyle Carpenter and fucking Jason Dunham and, all these heroes. And it was one of those things where it was like, dude, like, I understand I'm going into the reserves, but I'm also, you know, kind of like I'm not sure if this is really going down, like with the active, ramping up and stuff, but we just went for it, man. And fucking so my buddy Mark and I did the boot camp program together. And so when I graduated high school, it was about 10 days after that I went down to Paris Island.
Nice.
And
So
yeah.
you had a couple days the party with your friends or whatever, and then off to good old Marine Corps boot camp.
Yep. Yep. That was fun. Definitely a wake up call to like the fucking intensity that was expected, of what was about to be U.S. Marines, right?
Hmm.
And
What was like
I
the
had
first
never,
thing that you noticed that you're like, okay, this is really they are not fucking around.
fuck. Shit, I remember pretty early one of my DIs like fucking it's like a little bit shorter than me. He like came up to me, gave me like a nice little headbutt with his his hat and everything like that. But I think it was Black Friday really that like was like, oh shit, like the intensity level went from here to like here. Because like for the first couple of weeks or whatever, you're in receiving and it's like just all admin stuff. And I was like, well, this isn't too bad, and then you meet your DIs and it's like, oh shit.
Yeah, this
Fucking shit's getting real.
yeah. Did
But
you have any struggles through boot camp, or were you pretty pretty well-rounded Marine recruit?
no, man, dude, I was pretty average. Like I said, I think I tried to float under the radar as best I could. Definitely not anything worth notable until they fucking caught on that I was there with my boy. And, then they started because he was a squad leader. He was a fucking hot shit dude. He got out like a sergeant and fucking ended up, doing, good 6, 8 years total. And, so he was just fucking taking charge and fucking we would be fucking around and fucking one of the DIs caught me like laughing at him and then I got fucking smoked, dude. I got fucking, run up and down the squad bays and fucking all this shit. But I mean, for the most part, it was the most notable thing for me and like that taste of the infantry life was basic warrior training. And that was something that fucking just like, dude, I just remember like being completely broken off, man. Like after like jumping over the fucking the low walls, you're doing the turkey peeking and fucking you're jumping over the walls and you're fucking low crawling under the barbed wire or whatever. And it's just like, dude, my fucking shit was like my skin was all ripped up, my fucking elbows were all torn up. And I just remember like you getting like the hasty fucking 180 or 360 or whatever at the end of the course. And I just remember just like trying not to pass out because the drill instructors were fucking 6 meters away or whatever, but like just like pissing myself and being like, dude, this is like the greatest feeling I could give myself right now. It's just like letting go of the little bit of urine that I have and just being like, dude, this is what I was kind of asking for myself. And it hurt so fucking bad, dude. I think everybody kind of has their point where they're like, holy fuck, dude, like I'm broken. Like I want to like raise my hand and just be like, yeah, I think I'm all set with this stuff, but you just fucking shut your fucking mouth and just roll with it. And you're just like, one fucking lunch at a time, one breakfast at a time, whatever you got to do. And
Hmm.
by the time you realize it, you might have had some attention brought on you. But yeah, at the end of it, I was just happy to fucking get out of there and like see what the infantry life was like.
Then you go to infantry training battalion in Camp Pendleton, yeah? Or no, you go to Camp Geiger because you're on the East Coast, right?
Yep.
So you just what did you go as an open 0311 or did you have a designated MOS?
No, one of the nice things about the reserve contract was it was locked into an MOS. I think originally I was a 51. And then somewhere along the line they changed it to mortars. And I remember sorry, that's my dog. And I remember having like an emotional reaction because like I had this fucking GI Joe that was a mortarman and I like hated him. And I was like, dude, this guy is the pussiest guy. Look at him with his fucking tube, and he's not doing any like door kicking. Like, what the fuck is this guy? And I had him like in his like little case or whatever. I never opened them, and then fucking contractually obligated, 41. And I'm like, oh, all right, I guess I'm doing that now because the Marine Corps told me to, and you got to do what she says. And it wasn't bad, man. Dude, infantry battalion was that's where like I was like, yeah, dude, this feels a bit more like home because I don't know, man. I didn't really consider myself like I had a bit of the taste of like the drill stuff and like the drill and ceremonies and civil air patrol and all that. And it was like fine, but that shit didn't get me hard. Like I wanted to do like mount and I wanted to like play with fucking pew pews and you know like fucking hear shit go bang bang. And like I felt more at home at Camp Geiger, and that was like a wake up call, definitely like more physically. Fucking doing hikes with the fucking weapon systems and shit. And you were an 11, right?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, but you've been there, dude. Like you're carrying fucking ammo, you're carrying mortars, you're just hiking like a motherfucker. And I was like, dude, this is nuts. Like I thought I was in pretty fucking okay shape, like coming out of boot camp, but like at the end of ITB, dude, I was like running my fastest 5K and all that. And I was like, dude, this is fucking cool. This is a nice trajectory. And luckily for me, the trajectory kept going because as soon as I checked into my unit, we were slated for Iraq.
Like right away. So once you got there, like you knew right off the bat.
Yeah, I actually had the lowdown from the Lance Corporal Underground, believe it or not. It worked for the first time, and I believed it every time since then.
Did that set you up for failure, like moving
No,
forward in the
dude.
future?
No, dude, for success, bro. Because I was like, if I can believe the Lance Corporal Underground, at least like 40% of it, there's always truth. There's always truth.
Yeah,
In my experience.
it's hard to it's hard to tell on that one. You really never know, to be honest with you, because you just get some random shit that's said. Um, so you get done. What time frame is this then? Once you're finished up with ITB?
Uh, that was, I remember Halloween, we were doing a fucking mortar shoot. So it was probably about the beginning of November, because I remember checking into 125, which is up at Fort Devens, Mass, and the staff sergeant. So, and back to my Lance Corporal Underground story. I was at ITB and I was like in line. And as Marines often do, just stand around fucking shooting the shit with the dude in to the left or right of you. And we were organized by reserve unit at this point. And I was asking the dude, like, where are you from? Just shooting the shit. And he was like, oh, like fucking somewhere up northeast. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, what unit are you with? And he was like, oh, I'm with 125. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, what are you doing here? Like, because he was like a PFC or like, well, I think he might have been a Lance Corporal or something, but he was definitely. So there was like a split reserve program at that time, and I'm not sure if it's still implemented, but like basically what you could do is you could go to boot camp and then like go instead of going to ITB, they would go to their unit. So like he had been up at 125 already and like shooting the shit and training with, whatever company that he was with and getting like, kind of on the job sort of training. And then he
Oh,
would go
that's I yeah,
down
I'd never heard of
in
that before.
yeah, it was wild. I'd heard of it like at the time, but like I never like knew anyone that did it. So we were sitting in line and he had been with 125 already. And he was like, yeah, did you hear we're going to Iraq? And I was like, no. And I was like, yeah. He was like, yeah, dude. And I was like, all right, well, I guess that's happening. So I had like a couple months notice before like actually checking into the unit and like hearing from some like my first sergeant being like we're going down range and blah blah blah. So yeah, it was wild, man. Like like I didn't think much about it. I was like, like here I am, I've got the fucking EGA, I've earned all this shit, and like if this is what we're gonna do, like I'm glad that I'm on this path that is the fucking, what I consider, a pretty solid trajectory into what turned out to be, Mojave Viper and all that shit.
So
So
you get there to your unit in November of 2005 or 2006?
yeah, it was November 2005 that I'm sorry, yeah, December 2005, I checked in. And then January 2006, we basically are activated and our orders start.
Okay, so then that's when you guys start like doing Mojave Viper and doing your work up to deploy to Iraq.
Yep, yep. We started in Fort Devens because they have like a training ground up there and shit like that. But it was wild. I was like, why are we training for Iraq like in like the blizzard that's happening right now? And like, we're doing like fucking combat shoots and shit, like well, like 2 feet of snow and shit. But you gotta get the fucking trigger time in, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. You definitely have to get that in, get a little preparation in order to, you can't just send a bunch of fresh ass PFCs to 29 Palms and do like squad maneuver ranges and stuff like that. So get a little bit of that training in and then prepare yourself for that next step.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And we made that next step. And thankfully, we had a lot of like, at this time, we had some seasoned NCOs, join the ranks. My fucking vehicle commander was
I'm sorry, were they coming from other places or were they already with different reserve units or how did that work?
yeah, a couple of them came from, I think like we might have had some 325 guys who had been to Iraq prior, in like 2004 or whatever. What ended up being my vehicle commander was a 3.5 vet. He was in Phantom Fury, so he came in just from hearing that we were going to Fallujah, and it was like I want a little bit of that. So he jumped on board. And we just had like some other augments that decided to come on, and some of the guys that were um, I probably had a little bit of time under their belt too. So
Okay. So you guys start doing that whole workup, then you go through um getting into, doing a little more in-depth stuff like Mojave Viper, maybe like an ITX or something. How long do you guys have to start training as a unit before you're getting prepared to go to Iraq?
well, it was wild, man. I mean, like, we didn't really start getting into our like true like training routine until about halfway, like into fucking being at 29 Palms, which was, at this point we had been training from January to, we left in like March. So, February, so about halfway through that, we split up into what was going to be map platoons. So we went from being an 81's, trained section into what was essentially like a cat, fucking combined anti-arms, for those that are unaware, which was, basically a nice selection of, what the weapons company assets had, which were 240s, Mark 19s. We also had some guys from the reserve unit down in Oklahoma, which were trained in tows. They came up, they augmented with us. So it was like really baffling at that point because, for up until that point, we had been training as, 81s and, machine guns and anti-armor and shit like that. So that was the big shakeup. But I think at that point we had found our footing as far as like who we were going to be patrolling with and who we were going to be, doing the day in and day out shit with.
Right, and
So
that's a big key right there is like find the integration between everybody, inner squad, inner platoon, whatever. So you guys know what you're going to be doing with each other once you get there.
yep, yep. So I mean, there was some bitching and moaning to begin with. Obviously, people didn't want to be split up from their homeboys, and but man, I was just rolling with the punches. I was just like, fucking PFC don't know what to do. Just point and tell me where to go, and I will do it. And for me, it was like job efficiency was priority. Because I felt that I was not like the most stellar dude. I was keeping out of trouble for the most part, but like physically, I wanted more out of myself. So, I just was like, job proficiency. Let's fucking be the best mortar team or whatever. And at the end of the day, when we turned out to be the map platoons, I was going to be a driver. I was like, all right, well, that's the billet for the lowest ranking dude. So I guess that makes a ton of sense that I'm going to just drive everywhere. So, I had just freshly gotten my license back in Rhode Island and basically just learned how to drive Humvees from scratch, and it wasn't too bad, but I clicked very well as we're going back to like small unit, an integration into your teams and shit like that. Ended up spending the whole deployment with two other guys, which was pretty rare because in our company they would tend to, pick people to do like camp guard or whatever, just kind of rotate people in and out. And I was a little bit of a troublemaker, and my first sergeant didn't want me to be leaving the wire, but my buddy Tim stood up for me, and he was like, like Ben like knows his shit. Like I want him like where he is. So that was very humbling. When I learned that, I was like, cool, man. Really appreciate that because at that point, I wanted some validation because I was trying, and man, I think at the end of the day, people can thrive in those sorts of situations, regardless of fucking who they think they are or the person that they want to be is kind of like always within grasp, right? And so when we're doing patrols and shit, it was
Where are you guys working out of? Where are you guys working out of?
Camp Barria, which was about a mile and a half or whatever outside of like the city limits.
Okay. And what was like your mission that they had you guys do? Just basic like census patrols? Are you doing foot and vehicle stuff, or is it mainly all vehicle stuff?
Well, we were there for about 7 months, so it kind of changed as you know, the enemy changed their fucking TTPs. When we came in, we were taking the AO from 2-6, I believe, and it was about 18 months after Phantom Fury. So by this time, I was well aware of like what Fallujah was, but I had never been to like a third world city, you know. There's really nothing that I could compare it to either, right? And it's like, you take somebody, and I've been to some like hoods and shit like that, but I've never seen anything like, what was 18 months prior, basically like a flattened fucking war-torn city, and was now like kind of coming to life in like with people fucking bustling about and shit. It was wild, dude. It was a wicked eye-opener. And the only city experience that I had had, was like Providence. I'd never really I'd done like New York, I'd done London, but these are like, I'm doing the touristy shit, so I'm not walking through the fucking, the rough areas or whatever. So, Fallujah was just a big eye opener culturally. What was our mission was more or less counterinsurgency shit at that point, because at that point the fucking insurgency was ramping up. uh, you know, we were there from March to October '06, and it was just for the first, few months, not super kinetic. We were getting some of the patrols were getting in contact, but for the most part, it was light. We had a couple KIA here and there, and then come the end of the deployment, it was getting really bad. And on a particular day, almost fucking lost my own life. Fucking a couple of my friends, were dismembered and shit like that. So it was wild, man. Like when we turned over the AO, dude, like we were like, yo, this shit is real. And this was just kind of, Ramadi was super, super hot. Like we knew what that shit was going down to Ramadi. Like they were basically doing what the Phantom Fury thing was in Ramadi, but like just on very small scales, like in chunks, they were doing it. And we had kind of seen a little bit of that with like some of the battalion ops that we had done. We would sector off like a fucking portion of the city or whatever, and like fucking tanks would roll through. We'd have, air on site and stuff. And this was like, I had never seen anything like this
Right,
outside
yeah,
of like
you're just like
MAGTF and
yeah,
shit.
yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, what the fuck, dude? Like a little bit of the combined arms shit. Like, we might have had like a Huey out in California or something, but this was like the whole kit and caboodle, dude. I was like, dude, this is fucking nuts. Like, I was
Yeah,
like
and
on a
you
roof.
got a front
And
seat show to it, like you're
yeah.
fucking first hand view.
Yep.
Sorry, what were you
So
gonna say? You're gonna say you're
no,
on a
no,
roof.
yeah, dude, no. I was on a roof, fucking just overlooking the city when they were doing some battalion op, and I just remember all this shit, and I was like, wow, man. And just seeing it and being like a part of the machine, it's just it's such a wild experience. And I felt at home, man. Like it was a weird experience to like be seeing it and being a part of it and be like, holy fuck, like it's just such like a wild thing. At that point, like I didn't realize it, but I was like just practicing mindfulness as best I could, and like trying to just fucking stay alive and stay focused and be aware of like all my entire surroundings and shit. Like I say that like I'm a highly sensitive person and shit, but like I think that I wanted to use that shit to my advantage, because I have like keen senses, or at least I used to. I'm getting fucking old and fat now, but like I wanted to be like, like let me use that shit like and like a battlefield space, like for my homeboys or whatever. And you know, you try and you do your best. And at the end of the day, though, like the fucking chaos of war doesn't care how fucking like good you are, or it doesn't care how fucking like sensitive and acute you are. Like your fucking sixth sense can only do so much. And then you're just fucking hitting, walls and shit. And like, I don't know. It's like one of those things where you just can't anticipate like the actual violence that you can experience.
Well, is there something in particular that comes to mind when you think of that?
Yeah, man. On September 4th was probably the most of 2006 was probably the most violent day that I had experienced. And it started, rather plainly. There was going to be a funeral or like some kind of like in the center of the city was like an open like air base, more or less. It was an old government compound that had been taken over, and one of our companies was operating in there. And there was going to be like a some kind of ceremony in there or something where we had to do some satellite patrolling and just act as a deterrent. And fucking all of a sudden the radio lights up, and we're rolling to a situation where one of our boys' is fucking Humvee is like completely engulfed in flames, and it hit a fucking IED that went off underneath it. And it was bad. And no contact after, but like we lost 3 Marines right there. Well, 2 Marines and a corpsman. And we try and lick our wounds a bit and fucking rest and refit for a little bit at the fob that we operated out of camp, which is Bahria. And then that evening we went out to go, stay at another fucking fob or whatever, or an entry control point. And one of our trucks hit an IED, dude. Like fucking, and all I remember is like the had the NVGs down. We were going blackout, and the fucking NVGs like flashed white from the IED, and fucking like I was like, dude, fuck, dude. I wanted like nothing more than to just keep driving. She's like, I gotta go, like fucking get the Back to the Future jets going, and we're like, gotta go, see ya. But you're compelled as a fucking Marine, as somebody who is like, these guys are counting on me. They need my vehicle to stay in the fight. They need my fucking gunner to rip that shit up with the 240 if we're getting ambushed, which we were. So we roll up, the fucking once again burning Humvee, fucking Marines getting dragged, fucking dudes fucking throwing frags into the compound that we're like taking fire from, fucking. And then we just booked the fuck out of there, dude. Like we had like air on site and shit at the end of it, but like once we were clear to go, like we fucking hauled ass to the medical, center up at Camp Fallujah, and did our own fucking medevac. And thankfully nobody was killed in that attack, but like that was just such an eye-opening, like fucking, it ended up turning out to be like a 20-hour day or whatever. But like it was just like, dude, I had never, and I don't even know if, even Tim, who was, kicking down doors of fucking Phantom Fury, was like, yeah, that was a wild one. And it was one of those things that stuck with me, man. Like I still to this day like fucking have images of like the flash of the fucking the NVGs and like the fucking rumbling with the IEDs and shit like that. And I
Oh
mean these
yeah.
shits
Oh
were,
yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah, dude. So it was one of those things where, in like we were gonna pull a few more patrols, but at that point, we were more or less about to do left seat, right seat with the incoming unit. Was another reserve unit, 124. Man, they ended up getting fucking rocked, dude. Like the the surge, the Sunni triangle, the Sunni surge hadn't quite happened. That was about to be in 2007, where they just put tons of money into, arming the Sunnis and making, that part of the population stronger and shit like that. So up until that point, dude, like all of like the fucking, coalition US, was basically all Marines and, some soldiers and sailors and shit like that. But basically largely Marines. that were over there were getting fucking rocked. And 124 had like 22 KIA, like I'm sure like hundreds fucking wounded and shit. Like it was a bad area. And these a lot of these guys were bouncing, the insurgents and Marines both were bouncing between Fallujah and Ramadi, just trying to fucking keep shit like, keep fucking fobs manned and shit like that. So, by the time that we turned over the AO, bro, like we were like, yo, shit's gotten real fast. And like,
So do you think that the op tempo then like had increased from when you guys had first gotten there, like picked up throughout the time towards your end and you guys really started getting into it and obviously that created a problem for the follow-on unit that replaced you guys?
yeah, totally, totally. And it really wasn't until, you know, I got home that I was able to try and like decompress some of this shit, but it followed
Oh
me,
yeah, like
and
being on deployment, especially with the way you're describing, you guys are, you know, getting out there, the things you're experiencing, you don't really have the ability to deal with it while you're on deployment, especially being a young kid too, you're 19, 20 years old at this point, experiencing all this crazy shit, losing some friends. How did you, I mean, you were going to get into that, I'm sure, but like how did you start to cope with that once you came home from that deployment?
well, I guess we try all like our coping mechanisms that we know at first, right? And like it's unique as a reservist, right? That, so like let me backpedal a little bit. I will get to your question for sure. I appreciate the question. It's a good one. What like was unique for a reservist was, like our demobilization was at Pendleton because we were based with 5th Marines. So, that was, their headquarters and shit. So we were like, that's where we demob. And then from there, we went over back to Fort Devens. And, that's when I actually first saw my family. And here I am, like you said, just about to turn 20. And I'm like, back living at home with my mom and dad. Like I got nowhere to be. Like I don't have a fucking job, dude. Like I've been at fucking training for the last, like I quit my job. Like I was working at McDonald's as a 17-year-old, like I quit my job and shit. Like, so my only job at that point was, a Marine reservist, right? So I fall back onto, drinking, fucking, being a slob, fucking still trying to get after like the school thing because that had always, been part of what I wanted for my personal journey. But yeah, and I think like we had like a few months off drill too. So I was definitely like being sloppy and like just losing marine like job efficiency like fast, like becoming not what I thought was, like here I was like in my mind, like as a 14-year-old or whatever, like once I was gonna go through combat, like fucking dude, like my six pack was gonna come in, my fucking traps were gonna explode, like I'd have sleeves and fucking neck tattoos and I'd be wearing fucking teeth and it's like yeah, but it's like, dude, I felt fucking pretty warped, more or less. I did not feel like the version of myself that I had, on my like, as Cody Alford likes to say, like he had like his vision board and shit, and he got after that shit, and fucking. I love that dude's story. That dude has an incredible story, and that's the kind of dude that like even today, like I look up to those dudes. I'm like, dude, those tier one dudes are so fucking hard and shit. But like, like you just don't know what that shit is going to do to you. And I felt real chewed up. And, I did a couple drills, but circa 2007, I was like basically just got myself right into like therapy and shit because I realized something was going on.
Did you do
And
that through somebody saying something to you? Like, was it brought to your attention that you had a problem or that you were, or did you notice like I'm not sleeping or my habits are fucked up, I'm drinking more, I'm, more volatile, angry, I'm just wondering how that process went for you to get involved with therapy.
yeah, somebody had to call it to my attention, which and it was a close family member, and they, I trusted them because they saw a change in me, obviously. And I was boozing pretty hard. People were worried about my, alcohol intake and shit. And I was like, all right, yeah, let's try and get this shit squared away. Because at that point, I still had another, 6 years left in my contract. And I wanted to,
Wait, hold on. You still had, you'd only been in the Marine Corps. How did you re-enlist at some point through here? You got a whole, how long is your contract that you
I'm
signed?
sorry. I'm sorry. I had another 4 years. Yeah, because it was a six
Six year
by
con
two.
6 year
Yeah,
contract? Okay, gotcha.
yeah. My bad. Yeah. So yeah, that would I still had another 4 years, and I was like, dude, what the fuck am what's going on here? And so once I got into therapy, I started realizing that shit was not right in my head, and I continued drilling for a couple of years, but at some point I did not feel that cohesion. I did not feel that familial bond that I had with Weapons Company, with more particularly First Platoon and fucking Fallujah. And because a lot of those guys were gone, man. Like those guys' contract, they had extended their shit to go to Fallujah. They were at the end of their contract and they were like, all right, well, I guess we'll go. And most of them were actually and I'm not talking about like the seasoned augments or anything like that, but the guys that were 125 drilling reservists and shit. They had done a deployment to Okinawa where they were basically, it was kind of like a support operation kind of thing, and they had the option, and a lot of these guys raised their hand because they looked over to their left and right and saw their homeboy fucking raising their hand. And some of those guys got killed, and it makes you wonder. And I had struggled with that shit, like the wondering of like like what had happened, why did he raise his hand, like why did he fucking volunteer to do this, what if he hadn't done it? And there's all that nonsense that goes on in your mind, but at the end of the day, you realize that you got to take care of what's going on, right? And
Definitely, definitely. If you gotta address, like when you start to notice that there's something going on, I think for so long, especially if you're still in active duty, at least back in the day, I don't know what it's like now with being able to get some help and have it more readily available to you, not have it be such a stigma, but feel like if you do see or realize that there's a change or you notice that there's problems and other people are pointing it out, the sooner that you address that is the sooner that you can start working on making that progress back and like, rebounding into and not falling into a hole, not digging yourself into a deeper hole. That's the best thing you can do.
yeah, absolutely, bro. And like at that point, like I felt really miserable as a Marine. I had started school 2007, and my focus was going to be in video production. It's something that I'd always been enamored with, is film and media and TV and stuff like that. So, one of the local colleges and universities had a really good video production course. I was like, I'll get after that. But here I am, fucking 19 years old, you know, Fallujah veteran, as the colonel, had given us the title. Like I didn't feel worthy of that. Like I wasn't in Phantom Fury, but I was like, okay, I guess like the city kind of has its own carries its own weight. In the operations that happened there were definitely pretty legit. But I had a chip on my shoulder, dude. But I felt that I was, in that mindset, like here I am, like, like walking around like fucking big shoulders and working at Sears. And I just felt like so, like working at Sears as like a merchandise pickup guy just felt like so beneath me. And, going to school
Oh
was
yeah.
was
Yeah.
fine or whatever. But like, dude, like, like the sort of, I wouldn't, I'm not gonna. I'll use this in jest, I'll use this lightly, but like the Rambo complex, with a speech where he gives at the end where he's like, I was taking care of millions of dollars in machines and equipment and personnel, and here I am, I can't even get a job, or whatever he says. But it felt pretty similar to that, and like in my mind there was, this grandiose vision of, what I had aspired to try and be. And like it was just getting like torn apart in front of me. And I was just like trying to just fucking scoop my guts back in and like get my shit together enough to like be like, okay, well, what can I do to just one, like make myself more fulfilled and content. I was having really bad panic attacks, fucking going up to drill was super hard. Like putting on the uniform was rough, dude. Like just getting up to like to go to the base was a challenge. And like here I was like, basically almost every other fucking day, I'm fucking around, I'm going to school, I'm getting drunk every night. Like I'm not taking care of myself. Like as a Marine who, we were slated for a deployment to Afghanistan in 2011. And, like as a combat seasoned Marine, like I had, this vision where I was like, I needed to fucking be there for these guys. But I was falling apart, dude. I was fucking physically, mentally, spiritually just falling the fuck apart. So, while I continued, seeking therapy and shit like that, I got a medical discharge from the Marine Corps because I thought at that time, as like a 21-year-old kid or whatever, like I thought that that was the only option. Looking back now, I almost wish that I had, maybe like just talked to somebody and been like, look, let me, do the rest of the, because I think I got out like 2 years early or whatever. Like, let me do like the rest of the 4 year contract and we'll see about, like pull me like in the rear lines or whatever. But like it was shame, dude. Like there was so much fucking shame. Like not only to one, like seek the med sep, but two, to be like, well, what's my other option? Like, am I gonna like fucking seppuku myself in front of like the battalion commander and like cleanse myself of like the guilt that I feel? Like, because one, I didn't want to go over there and be a fucking liability. Who the fuck wants that? Like that's the
You're talking
worst
about
thing I
in
could
terms
do.
of deploying and going to Afghanistan, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, that's the worst fucking thing I could do is go over there a hot mess, spiritually, physically fucked up and not doing my job, which I'm sure was going to be, more patrols and shit like that, which they ended up doing. But, so circa 2009, I got med sept and I had just about graduated my first degree, which was as an associate's, and then my fucking life kind of falls apart because my friend is going over to Iraq for the second time. Or oh no, I'm sorry, that was 2007. God, getting old, dude. But yeah. So 2009, I got medsept and like just tried to carry on with like civilian life basically, and it was fine, but I was still struggling, and basically have been doing the healing route ever since, more or less. So
So you took a lot of booze, a lot of tearing yourself up that way. You got medically separated from the Marine Corps at 21. After going to Fallujah, you finish with you get some schooling in. I mean, what year? So we're talking like 2009, 2010. Where are you at then? Are you still continuing to do therapy? Are you seeking help from other organizations? What is it that you're doing to keep yourself busy? Are you working full time?
yeah, I was basically going going for my bachelor's degree. So I had another, year and a half or so with that. But at that point, I had kind of gotten a couple jobs. One as a front desk associate, the other as a videographer for sports teams. So hockey teams and shit, the local minor league teams, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
Fucking love the sport. It's a great sport, and I just thought it was just nice way to kind of tie a couple things I'm passionate about together, the video world, ice hockey and stuff. So that was pretty cool. Um, Still continuing to try and, go to therapy and find something that sticks, but nothing really stuck with me until uh 20 like 14. I think I started the CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy,
Hmm.
and that just fucking like blew my fucking mind, dude. Like it was unlike anything I had ever experienced in terms of like what had been, I don't know if maybe just the other programs didn't stick with me or whatever, but that was something that just it was probably the mixture of that program and that doctor that kind of guided me through that really was super beneficial because
Well,
go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, do you think that it's because maybe you're a little bit older and you're more wanting, to participate or be more involved? Do you think that you had a mindset shift in how you were going to attack that problem you're dealing with?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. I also think that I had to have other perspectives. I had to have kind of other utilities under my belt before, I guess, having CBT click with me. Uh, because up until then, I had been really clicking with mindfulness and mindfulness based stress reduction. And when I saw the overlap between the two, I was like, oh, okay. Like I can use this shit. Like this shit is powerful, dude. And
And are you doing this with outside entities or is this all through the VA?
I feel really lucky to have a pretty damn good VA around me. The Providence VA is really, really good. They're rated pretty highly. And I have been lucky to have a good set of mental healthcare people.
What
Um,
about your family and your friends, your support system outside of that, they encourage you to go in and continue with this stuff?
yeah, definitely. And I was, and I am, and I still am, fairly proud of it. It's like no one should have this idea in their head that trying to be the better version of yourself is like something like, oh, there's something bad about that. It when you admit that like you're fucking broken and you need adjustments to become something that you envision yourself to be, and maybe not like that particular version of yourself, but an alternate version that is still willing to, use the intensity that you learned as a Marine, the discipline, the fucking all that shit that, you have to harness to make it in that world. How can I transfer those passions and those feelings and those values into, my life now as, what I guess is like, the military is behind me. I tried that fucking test drove that car, was done with it. All right, now what? Like, and I didn't want to fly that flag, dude. I did not want to fly the, Marine veteran writer flag for a while, dude. And not because I was like ashamed of it, but more or less because I didn't want my identity to be wrapped up in that. I saw myself as that, like that fucking sort of mentality. Like when I came back, like I said, like that chip on your shoulder, that fucking
Oh
that holier
yeah.
than thou attitude. It's
Well, was it all oriented towards things in military service, or was it just like a whole bunch of different things? Because I remember you had said something about um, that being some of the stuff from like your teenage years incorporated into that.
yeah. Well, I mean that stuff. I think the trauma from combat was obviously at the forefront of my mind.
Yeah.
In unpacking that shit for the last, 15, 16 years or whatever has been a fucking journey. It really has. And I don't want to claim that, I'm done unpacking that stuff, but a lot of it does feel like it's been put behind me, especially with the new book that I got coming out, which is going to be through Dead Reckoning Collective. It's my first and could possibly be my only war poetry, my only war oriented book.
Yeah.
Um, so, I just wanted to put that shit on paper and allow people to see, just the sorts of inner workings of I guess me in particular, but I think that I like to try and tell bits and pieces of parts of our generation and what drove us to, what compelled us to, voluntarily do this sort of shit.
Right. Well, and that too, was it for you that you found a way to almost find some stress relief or some coping in the creative outlet of writing about that stuff? And how did you come upon finding that?
Yeah, well, I mean, like you were getting at, that shit goes back to my teenage years, and I found myself dealing with depression and anxiety as a teenager. Writing was a huge part. Writing was a huge relief, and it was something that was super cathartic. It would allow me to get into, what I realize now was basically like a flow state kind of mindset, and practicing guitar, kind of same thing. You got muscle movement, you got skill like things that you're trying to get after, and so that stuff was always at like the forefront of my regiment. But there comes a certain point too where like, if you're stricken with fucking depression bad enough, like just getting out of bed is a fucking chore. And
Oh yeah, I know that one
you
fucking well enough.
you look at you look at the shit that you would normally, find solace in, and you're like, oh man, what? Like I don't have that connection, and it sucks, man, because and I think for folks that have to compartmentalize shit, whether it's fucking first responders, vets, whatever, anybody who's doing shit that's like outside of like what we consider like normal, on a day-to-day basis, I guess, in our first world, society, like when you find yourself disassociating with, something that you used to find joy in, like that, it doesn't feel wrong, right? Because you had to utilize that shit when you were about to go on patrol and your friend just died, and you just had to be like, okay, well, we're still doing our job, right? Like nobody's like coming, there's no fucking reloading the save button, like nobody's coming to get us. Like we still have to go do our job. There's still fucking people counting on us to go do that. Like so you that becomes a survival mechanism in that moment. So when you're utilizing that shit here, whether it's purposefully or because of a side effect of, what your mood is or whatever, it doesn't even like it almost like doesn't even feel wrong. It's like, oh well, yeah, no, I need this. I need this to, be, all clear in my head or whatever. So I think that is also kind of a struggle where like, yes, the shit that kept us alive also kind of haunts us in ways, but it also can still keep us alive, especially, our fucking folks out there who are, cops, firefighters, you need those fucking instincts. You need to be able to compartmentalize stuff to even just be able to get through your mission. But, I would hope, all of those, anyone in those sorts of positions are doing their due diligence to take care of themselves. I mean, I know that society is fucking whack right now, and, police
Yeah,
departments and correction.
that's neither here nor I mean,
Yeah,
not to
yeah, yeah.
interrupt you. It's like it's
It's all good.
we get so fixated on what other people are doing and who's saying what, and it really comes down to changing wanting to change for yourself, one, right? Take the time to step back from all the other bullshit that's going around that we can't really around us that we can't really. And again, I'm not like a mental health professional, so this is just from seeing the way that, this stuff works for me and through the things that I've been through. If you take a step back and you focus on what's going on around you, like, even cleaning your house and making sure that like shit's in order and you've got a little schedule and organization to things. If you start it there and then, incorporate some working out and, now your diet and change, like that stuff all goes into being involved with therapy, making those steps to open yourself up to take those next steps. And you can't let the shit that's going like, oh, I don't have time for that because of this, or I can't get involved in that because of, making excuses for it. You have to be ready for it. You have to want it. And, so many people say that they don't like the way that they're living their life. And I mean, I'm guilty of that shit too. I talk about this stuff like, I'm still working on this every single day. I don't have it fully figured out, but these are the things that I gather from the resources that I have and the people that have educated me on these things. And all those people are professionals. So the best thing that we can do is talk about those experiences that we have and how it puts us in line to be able to better ourselves, open us up to be able to do things that we're creative with. I mean, like for me, it's talking to other veterans and doing things like this, being able to capture these moments. Um, so we each have our own way of dealing with things and also getting out there by you writing about it, that can help somebody, by us talking about it, that can help somebody, by going out there and starting a nonprofit organization that, obviously is known to help people. So there's different ways of giving back and participating. And, have you been fortunate enough to been able to work with any nonprofit organizations since, getting out of the military?
Yeah, I have been pretty fortunate. I tried my stay at the typical VSOs, the DAV, VFW, AMVETS, kind of put my foot in a few of those doors, more or less based on geographic proximity. The DAV that I was going to was like right down the road from where I was working. Um, but now I am much more proudly the current VP of the 1st Battalion, 25th Marine Association, which was started by a warrant officer, Jim Bailey, who's been doing a fucking awesome job. It basically started as the we had our 2016 Fallujah reunion, which was like the 10-year anniversary of the deployment. Um, so that group of people more or less became the 125 Association, who our mission is, scholarships. If a 125, member or family member reaches out to us and they're, something catastrophic has happened, we will use some resources to try and help them out. But our bread and butter at this point is scholarships and helping the community that is the 125. And we have uh, a lot of Fallujah vets. It makes up our ranks, but we also have guys who went to Afghanistan. We have Desert Storm, Desert Shield guys, and we also have a lot of guys who just did the reserve thing in like the 80s and the 90s,
Right,
and
right. And I
we
mean
want
that,
them.
yeah,
We
definitely. I mean,
want
that's
them.
just as important, like signing your name on the dotted line to, serve your country in whatever capacity that is. I think that's a big thing to focus on because we talk about that chip on our shoulder when you get out and the things that you're struggling with. I mean, I definitely experience, I mean, I've talked about it in, basically every other podcast and my inability to be open to other forms of service and stuff. And I think now it's been a lot easier when, especially participating in therapy with other veterans that may not be combat veterans, which um, no fault by them. But that's good that this is what I wanted to ask. That's good that you guys do that and you keep in touch with each other and do that organization. Is it the fact that do you think that because you guys are a reserve unit and a lot of those people still live in the area, does it make it easy to be able to do a lot more of these functions or like a meetup or you know what I'm saying? Is it easier have been a reserve unit and guys, I'm sure people still pick up and move, but are there a majority of people that still stay in the area?
Yeah, that is one of, the unique things of a reserve unit is the in particular 125 are we drill basically out of Devon's, and then there were a couple of units out of like Connecticut, New York, and I think at the time Maine, which they've kind of moved around. So it's a New England based unit. So yeah, that is a real nice advantage for us to have and to be able to, say, hey, let's do something in Boston one year and know that the turnout will be pretty decent because nobody is really having to like fly in or anything. The Semper Fi Fund of America has been very generous. In the past, they used the 125 reunion as like a template for their reunions moving forward, which is a huge fucking honor because they have just been cranking out amazing reunions for all sorts of units. So that was really amazing to see. Um, so in 2016 we had, what was the beginning of what was going to be this cool not-for-profit, and really just proud to be part of the organization. It's with my friends. I consider these guys friends, but these guys are also great leaders. They're fucking intellectuals, and they are getting after it and they are looking out for their own, and it's really nice to see.
Yeah, no, that's awesome because I feel like in your case, you guys you incorporate it's easier to incorporate the community in these things as well. When you guys do some whatever kind of events it may be, getting the non, so that kind of bridges the gap between the veteran and the civilian side of things where people may not understand, and now you guys do these events and bring in the community. I'm sure there might be other things that you guys do to stay involved as well. And that's really cool to be able to say that because not a lot of guys and girls have that ability to do so unless they're, like a local chapter of Patrol Base Abate or um, some of the other nonprofits that are like that and merging vets with players. They've got chapters, right? But everybody's kind of scattered from different units, different branches. Whereas in your case, you guys are like everybody was like 1st Battalion, 25th Marines, like at some point in time, they'd all served through those capacities. So that's pretty cool that you guys have a tight knit that's close by.
Yeah, and I mean we're not super particular about like, if you were like an FMF doc who deployed with 125 on one tour, like you're eligible, and like we don't turn away anybody. I mean, fuck, like you could be eligible, like we're not turning away people that weren't based out of 125 necessarily. We just want to spread the goodwill. Our money goes towards the scholarships and shit like that. So, yeah, I do help a lot with the back end website and shit like that. A lot of the volunteers have been nice to carry some of the weight, but I find myself a lot of the times just running the website and helping to make some decisions and stuff. So it's been really cool. It's a nice way to kind of grow my personal leadership and stuff like that, and to work with really amazing people.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I'm glad that, there's some people that don't really want to have anything to do with the military after their time in service, especially if it's super traumatic. And it seems like, you getting out, medically separated, you had dealt with a lot of issues and trauma that came from that deployment in Fallujah. But after and not saying that there's anything wrong with that whatsoever, like some people just have a hard time adjusting and it's a little I think a little different as well in your case where you're not going back to the barracks and reintegrating into like another workup and you're in the field and you've got all the Marines around you, you're living you said you were living at your parents' house. Yeah, that's got to be fucking difficult, dude. I can't imagine having to do that. Like you're just coming home and everything all of a sudden is like normal. It's you don't wear your
It
camis every single
was
day and you're like back in civilian life trying to navigate through what the fuck's going on. But um it's good to see that you've come around to being more integrated and the fact I'm super excited to see the book. When does the book come out and what's the can you do you know the name of it, the title of it?
yeah, title of it is Phantoms. And that was, a multifaceted kind of take on, a nod to Phantom Fury, a nod to the insurgents that we were fighting against, a nod to our own phantoms and the ghosts that haunt us. as we wander the waking world. That comes out some point this year through Dead Reckoning Collective. I don't know exactly when, but like the gears are moving, shit's moving ahead. I got the cover art is squared away. It's been squared away for a while now. I worked with a homie, long time friend of mine. He was a neighbor of mine growing up, who was he ended up being a Norwich cadet. He was one of my like friend group like that. We were all like like gung ho about like the military and fucking going out and doing ops at night as a 13-year-old and shit. So I hit him up. I was like, he's an incredible artist, and I was like, hey man, like I would love for you to like like have this like have you be part of this. And he came up with this concept that was just fucking awesome. He basically just took one of my photos from the deployment and did some artsy stuff with it, and designed the front, and it just looks incredible. And I hope I hope just the cover alone intrigues people enough just to kind of want to grab it, because I kind of went for like I think Mason was on to something when he went with like an album cover style. So I kind of wanted to like blend a little bit of that, but like maybe like a little more of an artistic side. So I hit my friend up and he came up with something incredible. So Phantoms, yeah, out via Dead Reckoning Collective, some point 2023.
All right, nice. Well, we'll be looking for that for sure. What is it that you're up to nowadays? You would mention you were going back to school, yeah?
Yep. I'm going back to school, utilizing voc rehab, which is now veterans re-employment or whatever.
hmm Yeah,
They
VR
changed
and
the.
VRNE.
Yep. So that was a really incredible program. I just went back to the same place that I got my other bachelor's from. This time studying cybersecurity, hoping to get into maybe private consulting or something like that. But it's cool to kind of integrate um, concepts of war fighting and tactics and shit like that into the cyber world and shit like that. So it's and it's not uncommon. I go to school with a couple other vets and dudes that have that did computer stuff in the military, and they did not or whatever. But yeah, no, it's a whole world that I've just been very interested in, and now I'm really getting into as a professional, and I like it a lot. It's awesome.
Nice. Are you already set up for a job once you get finished with school, or are you already getting after it, or what?
I had a couple jobs throughout school. I only have another semester left, so at the end of this year I'll be done. I'll probably be working with my voc rehab counselor to help set me up with something. But at this point, I'm pretty open. Um,
Okay, nice.
yeah.
Sweet. Well, is there anything that looking back on this journey that you've been through, that kind of brought you where you are now through the ups and downs that if you could give your younger self a word of advice, what would that be?
Hmm. If I could give myself advice, knowing what I know now, I don't know, man. Just try your damnedest and roll with the punches. Because I think that we all have these ideas of in our childhood, in our youth, in our looking at the projection of our future selves and shit like that, of like what that looks like, right? And like it's ingrained in us, like socially, culturally, like what are you going to be when you grow up and stuff like that. And to just fucking realize that not everyone is cut out the same physically, intellectually, spiritually, ethically, but we are all fucking people at the end of the day, and we have to account for feelings, account for emotions, regardless of what field you're in, regardless of what you are doing as an adult. regardless of what you have become as an adult. And those feelings and those emotions and shit that we had as kids, like, like they're still valid. Um, but I think, yeah, I think that just to be adaptable, man. And I think that that's kind of always been part of my mantra in one way or another is just to roll with the punches and have a vision, see it, go after it, and don't meander. Like just fucking just try
Go
your
out there and
damnedest.
get it. Yeah, go out there and get it. All right, that's good. Now, what would being a part of, Operation Iraqi Freedom, growing up during the GWAT, obviously seeing the culminating, pull out of Afghanistan and the end of the global war on terror. I mean, what if you could sum it up in one word, what would that word be?
Unprecedented. Um,
And why would you say unprecedented?
Mainly because I think the it's just kind of like the culmination of where we are as society, as a culture, technologically, the global connectedness, and throughout that 20-year frame, just so much has happened. And unprecedented in the way that it was a voluntary fight for our end. And not having, the culture of post Vietnam, I think was huge too. So like the metronome had swung in so many different ways since the last giant conflict, which I guess, more or less would be Korea. But Korea Vietnam era, nothing had, even Desert Storm, Desert Shield was a blip, more or less, compared to the entirety of the GWAT. So unprecedented in that I just think that a lot of us in this country were just really unprepared for the long game that was the counterinsurgency, the policies that were happening that kept boots on the ground, and the way that the game was played. And I tried to write about that a little bit in Phantoms. So
All right, well, it seems like we'll get a better dive into the thoughts on how I guess wrestle with that, and what because that was it was recently written, right? So you're getting like a fresh view on these things that you've maybe have had some things written previously, but it's all things that you've relatively been thinking of pretty recent in time, yeah.
yeah, it's all pretty recent. I think that three of the pieces are previously published. One of them or two of them with Dead Reckoning in one of their anthologies, and another one that came from one of my previous works. But yeah, dude, I even write about the evacuation of Kabul, and how that, you know, dude, I feel like that was like an instance of unbelievable collective trauma in the fucking GWAT,
Yeah.
uh, community. And when Fallujah and Mosul fell to ISIS and shit like that, like I was kind of numb, but like I heard a bit. But like, dude, when HKaya happened, I was like, oh my God, dude, just fucking like just emotions everywhere, bro. And I tried to capture that a bit in Phantoms. One of the pieces is about the 13 that were killed. And I try to relate it through my own experience, obviously, but try to also make it something that's a bit more hopeful and, not disparaging, because I kind of have a little bit of a reputation as, talking about pretty dark shit. And that's just always been kind of appealing to me, you know, for whatever fucking reason. I don't know. That could be a whole
I think it will,
different,
yeah,
different
I think
conversation.
it's easy to though, like it's easy to go revert back to that. I think that one, as obviously Marines gravitate towards a lot of shit like that. So it's easy. A lot of things don't make us cringe the way it makes other people, or it doesn't make them their spine crawl and tingle the way that, it wouldn't. It does make theirs the way it does not ours, so we can get down some pretty dark shit. I'm really looking forward to seeing things that you're putting down on paper. I know you've got some stuff out there already, and you've written stuff on Instagram and see some of the posts that you make. So if it's as good as that, I'm sure you'll be doing just fine. Is there anything that you want to add before we close up here?
No, man, I just want to say I appreciate the time. Shout out to, your previous guests. Shout out to you for giving me the time here. You got a family and the hobbies and things like that. So
Yeah,
I
well, we
definitely
tried to
appreciate it.
make it work. I know there's been some rescheduling and bumping things around to try to make it happen. Took a little bit of time, but that's just the way it is. I've had to do it to quite a few other people. Life comes up, go through some shit on my end, and I appreciate you being patient and working this out with me because I think obviously everybody has an important story to tell, and it correlates. It could, do something different for somebody, change a life, save a life. So, um, it's great to have you on, chat with you about that. I appreciate you sharing some of the more intimate things because I know that can be difficult and brings back some memories for some people. But like I said, dude, looking forward to seeing the things get put on paper and come out in book form. That'll be pretty sweet.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And like it's one of those things where like you have to just fucking kind of withstand the pressure in terms of like the feelings of bringing shit up, because for me I have to, sometimes, I'm expected now to like probably read some of these poems and shit. And, that in itself, I think is a really cathartic part of this because I don't want to just be the dude who's just writing poetry and getting out there. I also want to kind of incorporate, spoken word shit and the performance aspect and that stuff too. So, there's a part of me that it's obviously never gonna that stuff doesn't leave you, that
Yeah,
stuff's always a part of you. And then
definitely.
you have to kind of be okay with revisiting it in healthy ways.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that there's room to make progress and move forward with this stuff if you do it in a healthy format. If you're doing it in the negative way, I guess like using or abusing drugs and alcohol and like doing it in the wrong environments, that creates a problem. But if you create a safe space where you can be able to comfortably get that stuff out there, talk about it, and it's making progress forward and not bringing you back to a negative low point, that's only growth that comes for that. That's that post-traumatic growth that I think everybody is looking for. So, Ben Fortier, glad that you came on, dude. Appreciate your time. Love the things that you're doing. Keep it up. Love seeing you. We didn't even talk about getting into shredding guitar, but we can save that for another one. Um, Again, keep it up. You inspire a lot of people. You got a lot of people looking at what the things that you're doing. You can change one person's life, save one person's life. That makes the big difference, dude. So keep after it.
Keep on breathing, folks.
Hell yeah, brother. Take care. Have a good night, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay, man?
Take care.